This is a clip from Beyond Classified. You can access the entire episode now at rockfin.com/FKN+. We have a topic today about a mysterious group called the Guardians of the Looking Glass. And this group claimed to be a breakaway faction from the actual controversial Project Looking Glass, having resurfaced to help humanity avert upcoming disasters. And this group is apparently putting out this information online to supposedly help humanity. Now, we've seen these types of things before, especially recently, clandestine groups online that have critical information to save humanity, and us being in the community, we do see it very often. But this particular information is also very intriguing, and I believe that certain events that they spoke about have already come to pass. So this is going to be very interesting. Before we get into that, remind the audience a bit about yourself and your work that you're doing.
Well, I'm a filmmaker, and a lot of people know me from having made the films Packing from Mars, Solar Revolution, Klaus Donner Chronicles, together with my partner Tanya Maidenford. And that's been about, I guess we've been making those films and putting them out there since in the better part of the last 10 years. And what else? I'm a musician. I've done a lot of traveling, a lot of research. And when I made the film Packing from Mars, I kind of fell, head first into the whole disclosure scene, which I hadn't really, I was interested in it, but it wasn't something in my focus for most of my life until just, when I started making that film. And since then, I guess I've gotten in touch or in contact with people, whistleblowers, people that are talking about amazing technology which shouldn't exist, amazing archaeological finds that shouldn't exist, and essentially leading me to a clear picture that there's two worlds going on. There's the world that people perceive out there, the mainstream world, the one you see most people perceive on their television or on the internet, and then there's the real world, which is this, which is kind of on the fringes of that other world, So I've kind of straddled both of those for the last 10 years.
Right on, man. Yeah, I love the work that you're doing. And now, for the audience that may not be familiar with Project Looking Glass and what went on with this group and what they were attempting to accomplish, could you give us a little synopsis of that?
Well, they appeared in March 2022. And I personally stumbled on them completely by accident on a non-related research hunt, and I saw this thing said Looking Glass, and I knew about the Looking Glass from my association with Bill Ryan in Project Camelot. And Bill Ryan and Carrie Cassidy, his partner, no longer, but 10, 11, 12 years ago, they were doing a lot of videos with whistleblowers talking about secret technology, black ops projects, and one of those happened to be Project Looking Glass. And they had several interviews on their channel. A lot of them were with a guy called Dan Burish. Then later, after they split up, Carrie did another interview with a guy called Bill Wood. And then you heard nothing anymore until all of a sudden now, 2022, 10 years later. Except that the Bill Wood video has been circulating online, and a lot of people that have heard of Project Looking Glass now probably are familiar with the Bill Wood version more than anything, because it's been circulated millions of times. And the Burish material, you can find it, but it's sort of like if you're not into the Project Camelot material, you probably won't, just find it, You have to kind of look for it. And the Looking Glass, the 2022 appearance of Looking Glass associated people is with a group calling themselves the Guardians of the Looking Glass. So I hit this link. I landed on a YouTube page. There were a couple of videos up. One of them was called Event 1, April 18. Another one was called The Singularity. Both of those terms, or at least the singularity, was something I was very familiar with, because I also research a lot of things related to quantum computers, artificial intelligence, and things like that. And singularity is has a very specific meaning with respect to that topic. But the event one was interesting, and I clicked on it. And it was describing. They just went right into it. They're like this group of military insiders who had been involved in the original Project Looking Glass and had a data set of what they had captured with the device, the Looking Glass, and they were keeping it to themselves, and they'd kind of split off from the main group, mainly because what they had seen during the course of their when the project was active is they were just things that just shocked them to their core, things that were very in a way traumatizing and very apocalyptic with respect to mankind and the future of the world. And they knew that they had to get that information out somehow, and they were in a group. When you look into Project Looking Glass, you eventually come into contact with material that describes the people in that group that was in control of the project, and they're made up of Majestic 12 members, and those members are secret society members. And Majestic 12 itself is like the super secret society, on top of them all, in a way you could say. And they were made up of certain people that were, I guess the best way to describe them is satanic. They worship Lucifer. They've, sworn their allegiance to Lucifer. And then there were the people in the group that weren't in that, they weren't into that. They were, they were part of the group. They were actually quite happy to leak information out or help people in the world get access to this technology so that it helps mankind. So you had these two factions. And the Looking Glass Guardians seemed to be part of that latter faction. And what they were talking about with the technology was very fascinating, because it was covering topics or details about the project which I had never heard before. So that made it very interesting. And it contradicted, like, radically some of the information that was last put out with respect specifically to Bill Wood. And that's where I decided, I have to look at this closer, because if it's such a contradiction, it could have major consequences. Because on the one hand, the version in a nutshell that Bill Wood was putting out with respect to Looking Glass was that his involvement in the project was to try and solve a problem that the elite had, that the timelines that they were viewing, and we can get into more detail about how the thing actually works, but I'll just sort of summarize it a little bit here. The timelines would converge. And whenever they converged, they ended up, basically in favor of mankind. And the Looking Glass Guardians, they came out with a version that said, no, actually, it's the other way around. They noticed that no matter what they did when they intervened, it always worked out in their favor. So they weren't interested in having anybody interfere with the technology and anybody interfering with what they'd captured and putting it out there, because they were quite happy to let it go the route it was going to go. So obviously those are two radically opposing positions. Yeah. And the details they were describing were so monumental that I had to mull it over in my head for at least for several days. It's quite disturbing in a way. And then eventually I decided to publish an article. I was waiting for the usual suspects to come out with the information about it, and nobody was mentioning them anywhere. There was nothing about them anywhere. They had this little channel, and there was nothing going on. So I published a story in German, and I dropped also an English version onto Project Avalon. And the German site was picked up by somebody on John Nolan from Inspire Channel. And he knew the guy who ran that news portal in Germany, and he called him up and said, hey, this guy, Frank Jacob, can you put me in touch? That looks interesting. So he put me in touch. A couple hours later, we organized an interview. That interview came out 3 days later, and it went viral immediately, and hundreds of thousands of people have seen it, and it set in motion a huge explosion of discussion with respect to the Looking Glass Guardians.